Right, it is the big five, so we are talking about built things. The built environment is the big five phrase. We've had a lot of Q3 real estate reports over the last couple of months, to the point that we have drawn up the drawbridge to any more. But Knight Frank has snuck past the parapets because of one thing and one thing only. Their report looks at the risk of oversupply. Talking to us about that now, we have Faisal Durrani, the partner and head of research at Knight Frank. Faisal, good morning.
Morning, Brandy.
So we've been through the transaction volumes and the values a number of times now. It was record-breaking in Q3. It was a very strong quarter. But amid all of that, I like the fact that you're asking in your report whether or not we are facing a risk of housing oversupply. How real to you is the risk of supply outpacing demand?
So the risk is very real at the moment, Brandy. We're keeping a close eye on the volume of new property launches that are taking place almost on a daily basis. I mean, at a headline figure, we're tracking around 350,000 homes that could be delivered between 2026 and 2030. But realistically, we're not sure if all of that will actually materialize on time. And the reason I say that is because over the last 3 years, only 60% of housing that's been promised has actually been delivered. And this year, that figure is even lower at about 46%. We've been a bit more optimistic in our assumptions, assuming that 70% of housing will be completed on time and the remaining 30% delivered in the following year. So when we look at things that way, that reduces that 350,000 figure to 331,000, which is about 66,000 homes a year for the next 5 years, which is more than double the city's completion rate for the last 20 years. So we're still looking at a large volume of housing stock that could potentially arrive before the end of the decade.
Okay, so even with some developers missing their own deadlines, is that too much?
So that is the big question. So every equation has two sides. So we've also closely examined what the absorption rates could look like. Now, obviously, we've looked at population growth rates. The government itself are forecasting a population of 5.8 million by 2040, which means the population needs to grow by around 2.5% for the next 15 years or so. Last year, the population grew by 5.7%, and the 20-year average is nearer 6%. So as long as we stay above 5%, we will be able to absorb that stock. But of course, we must remember that in this cycle, we've got a new flavor of buyers in town, namely those looking at Dubai as a second homes or holiday homes market, especially those international ultra high net worth individuals, which I think we've talked about before. We know that about 55% of global high net worths view Dubai as a location to purchase either a home for use as a holiday home, a second home, or indeed somewhere for their kids or their family. So there is that element to consider too.
Okay. We're also hearing, though, that developers are beginning to speed up the construction cycle in a number of ways, working longer hours, permits being put through faster, etc., etc. If we do see oversupply, where do you think we would see it or feel it first? Which price point, which neighbourhoods?
That's a good question. So I think, look, just to take a step back for a moment, we've just hit the 5th year anniversary of price growth in this cycle. And this is the sort of stage where we do expect to see a slowdown in the rate of growth. And I think we are starting to see that. And if we do indeed see developers coming through with more stock, then I think in this cycle, it is going to start to slow down in terms of the rate of growth. And we will see it coming. Because I think the way this cycle progresses, it'll be far more nuanced. And as you say, we will see it in specific neighborhoods and specific price bands. So for instance, somewhere like Jumeirah Village Circle, we're expecting about 10% of that 350,000 figure to be delivered there. And that is a location that's likely to see prices flattening or even correcting slightly in the first instance. In terms of price bands, this is something we're monitoring, tracking listings as well as transactions by price band. And what's interesting is if you look across the city, everything up to 25 million dirhams, we aren't actually building enough housing to keep up with the rate at which they're being sold. Once we get above that price point, however, it is a different story. But we are talking about quite small volumes of housing stock above 25 million dirhams.
I've only got 1 minute left with you. You say in the report that every cycle has a beginning, a middle and an end. Where are we in ours?
As cliche as that sounds, I think we are approaching the top. What I will say is that at the beginning of this cycle, prices were growing at about 2% a quarter. In 2023, 2024, we were up at 4.3%. And so far this year, we're down at 3.2%. So we are already seeing price growth coming off just a little.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Faisal Durrani, partner and head of research at Knight Frank, coming in with a report that asks the question about whether or not we are facing a risk of housing oversupply in the Dubai real estate market. We appreciate your time this morning.